And do you have any other stories you want to talk about with the Vopar that you can think of?
Well, I remember one time Dave Waters, I don't know whether it was Dave or not, but we were out on the PDJ doing some mapping, and all of a sudden I looked up and I saw a flight of 4 F-4s, like I had flown, except these are Air Force F-4s, passing right over the top of us. And the next thing I know, they start dropping their bombs. And we saw all the bombs dropping. They were doing a TACAN bomb drop on a TACAN station. And that's what they call it, a TACAN drop. And they were dropping these bombs along the highway going out on the PDJ. And we saw them all go down right in front of us. And fortunately, obviously, they didn't hit us. That happened. And of course, when we had a C-123, that was shot down over the Chinese road. And Jim Ryan called me in. I was in the evening, and he says, "Come on, Frank, we got to go fly." And he told me we'd lost a C-123. I think it was Ritter, George Ritter, and was it Clarence?
Townley.
Oh, Townley. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, it was Ritter and Townley had been shot down in their crew. And so we went out and looked for them, and it was in the evening, and we didn't find them. No, didn't hear a word on the radio. So 2 days later, Jim went up with Bobby Harrell. Bobby was the chief kicker at Vientiane, in charge of all the kickers are the guys that, push out all the goods, rice, hard rice. So Jim Ryan and Bobby Harrell got in the back of 7-1 Charlie, and they took the hatch out, and they had all these pamphlets printed offering a reward for the plane for these gents, because we knew they were down there, but we didn't know where. So they went over, and they were up in the western part of Laos over the road making these drops. Well, at the same time, I was over the PDJ that afternoon doing some photo work, assigned photo work, when I heard Mayday, Mayday from Bob Maine in 7-1 Charlie. He says, "We've been hit." And of course, I was about 65, 70 miles east of him over the PDJ. So I called him right away and said, "I'll be there as fast as I can." And I picked up a heading, what I thought would intercept them, and it was the right heading, and I found him just as he was north of the Mekong coming down, and I was elated that I had found him, but I wasn't too happy when I got joined up on him, because there's a huge hole in the back where it had been hit, and the tail, it looked like, I was afraid the control cables, because it was metal control cables, it wasn't hydraulic on the Beechcraft Vopar. And I could see Jim and Bobby, and Jim was through the opening. And so I escorted him back to Udorn, and that's when Jim Ryan got hit and lost his leg. But he's an unbelievable man. He bounced back, and within a year he was flying again. Yeah, that was. And then, of course, right after I left Air America, one of the photo pilots got shot up and got ground fire, Pat Thorson, and Denny Thomas brought the plane back. And so yes, we did have tragedy, and it was to be expected, but it always hurts when it's somebody you know. Well, the only way I can say it is that I always wanted, since I was a boy, to I don't know. It's just something. I guess you could call it being jingoistic. Or, I was proud to be part of the military, whether it was the Navy or working at Raytheon. I was still working for the Navy and the Army and the Marines, Air Force, and all the projects basically were for the military. And then working, finally realizing Air America, and working with the government, I always felt proud. And although, believe it or not, I went to a bar in Hawaii once on R&R, and I remember once I told somebody I worked for Air America, and he got up and moved away from me. Now, there were a lot of people that, there's still people that have a feeling. I'm not saying that everything we did was right, but at the time, it's the idea is that you do what you think is right, and that's the way it was when I grew up, and we felt that serving our country was the thing to do. And I always felt that. I still feel that way, right or wrong.
And
Yes, in 1973, when President Nixon, and they had the peace accords in Paris, I believe, and they had stopped. They had stopped a lot of the bombings up north, and also between when they said that the war was over, and also I must admit I was somewhat disappointed in the way the war that was being run, because, like, for instance, I'd be out doing photo recce work up in Laos and find a convoy of trucks, enemy trucks that were traveling down the road, and I'd call up the high altitude relay plane, and by the time it went to Washington or wherever, down in the bowling alley or wherever it went, and by the time they get a strike sent in on them, they're gone. Well, things were, it was just a war. The last war that we fought and won was World War II, and that was not pleasant. And I just felt like when Nixon said it's over, then I said, well, that's over for me too. And it wasn't a question of anything else. I just said that's enough. And I left, and I went to Central America and bought a Twin Beach and became a civilian charter pilot carrying sick people mainly from Central America up to the States. But I was very proud, and I still am, of my service with Air America. And I'm glad that the agency finally chose to admit that, yes, we were part of them. And in fact, at one time they wouldn't, and now they do. And I think it's only right. I probably won't make any difference financially or anything like that. I'm not looking for anything except just to say, yes, he did work for us. And of course, I'm very proud of it. If I had it to do over again, I would. Oh, you mean the kind of flying we did? Oh, well, yes. There's no doubt about it. I think that my generation, the guys that I flew with in the Navy, and like your dad and all of us, we were really lucky to fly airplanes at a time when flying was, they'd hand me a handbook of an F-4, believe it or not. There was no ground school. There was maintenance school where I learned a little bit about the engine, but even when I flew as late as the jets I flew, there were no simulators. There was nothing. There was a handbook. I read it and I talked to the pilots, but it didn't do me any good to get in the back seat of the F-4. There was no stick back there and you couldn't see anything. So I got in it just like the F-6 and the F-86 and the F-4D, and you got in it and flew it. And but now it's a little more refined, of course. They have simulators and they make sure that they're more engineers than we ever were. And so we got to fly in an era where there were navigational aids, were low frequency radio ranges, N's and A's, and maybe shoot a GCA approach if people had them. But in the Navy, well, we didn't have anything in our planes that we flew. Nothing but they had something called ZB, YZB, and they used it on the carrier, and I could still remember the code. Did Willie really kill a nasty, ugly germ man last Friday, Saturday? And you knew that. If you heard that signal, you knew which way to go. And that was it. There was no bird dog, no pointers, no nothing. And we flew all over the country. IFR, just on down Amber 6 or on Blue 5, and there was no radar control, no nothing. But we did it and didn't think anything of it. And then we went into the stages where there was TACAN, VOR, and all that. But going back to Air America in Saigon in 1965 was like going back 30 years. So yes, it was really a fun era. And there's no doubt about it, when I first flew that F-3D in 1953 at Atlantic City, and the skipper told me to go fly it, and I said, I don't really not interested. And he said, go fly the machine, Frank. So I got in it and flew it. And once I flew it, they couldn't get me out of it. It had 2 engines. It had one handle, 2 throttles. You lit the fire. It had no gas system to worry about. The gas was either on or you were out of gas. It had a windshield wiper that swept it had an automatic pilot. It even had a needle that pointed at radio stations. It had a rug in it. It had a chute-to-chute escape hatch where you didn't have to bail out. You could go down the bottom, which I'm glad I never had to do. And it was simple. There was no torque. And in the big 2,000 horsepower engines, when you took off, you had to feed in a lot of rudder pedal to keep that engine, that torque on that engine, from keeping you from losing control. Well, in a jet, there was no torque. You could fly it. You didn't have to use the trim tabs. And it was so simple to fly. And man, after I flew that and go 350 knots,